Once again, everyone, thank you so much for being here for the second session of our Friday APEC Meets Silicon Valley, sponsored by Sutter Health. This is the third and last day. We've been so happy to have you all here all week long. Please welcome to the stage, already on stage, Bill Reichert, partner at Pegasus Tech Ventures, Lee Song, managing director, Silicon Valley Bank Global Gateway, Brian Bordley, partner, Berkeley Skydeck Fund, Regis Kelly, founder of QB3. And our moderator, Sean Randolph, Bay Area Council Economic Institute Senior Director.
Ooh, it worked. How cool. So, thanks very much, everybody, for being here. As you heard from the voice of God back there, this is our last of, I think, 14 events during APEC week. All of them designed one way or the other to bring together APEC visitors, people involved in APEC, with leaders in the business community here around the kind of interactions and opportunities that come out of these relationships between Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, and partners all around the Asia Pacific region. And I can say now that all the rest are finished, you guys are really in luck, because this is by far the best session of the week. It's just...
Should wait till it's over.
You have chosen well. So why we wanted to do this session goes back to why APEC came here. So we were involved in helping the city write the proposal that got APEC here. And one of the big selling points was, well, so San Francisco Bay Area with Silicon Valley, it's the acknowledged global center for innovation, technology innovation, business model innovation, and the premier global center for venture capital and for startups. And that's why so many companies from around the world are here. We've counted just in our institute more than 350 companies and organizations from all around the world that are here in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area in order to be part of the innovation economy. And in many ways, it's not just about Silicon Valley. We're not some island in the middle of nowhere. It's a platform for companies around the world, both large companies, but startups in particular, that helps them scale globally. And you can come here from anywhere in the world and benefit from the kind of infrastructure we have to grow your business. And thinking about APEC and the Asia Pacific region, well, that's the topic as these companies from the region and the governments look to grow their economies through innovation. So we wanted to provide an opportunity for people to really get a focus on what's the business model here in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley that makes it so successful, and how can people from other countries, especially startups and investors and large companies too, benefit. So we have a really amazing panel here. You couldn't find more experience and authority on this topic anywhere. So we're going to go through just a quick conversation, some questions, and then open it up to whatever you would like to say or to ask. So we're going to start with you, Bill. So Bill is a legend in the venture capital industry here, created Garage Adventures a long time ago, partner in Pegasus Tech Ventures. And so we'll start off talking a little bit, Bill, about just the venture industry. Can you tell us something about the scale of it here in the Bay Area, how it focuses, like thinking about how much activity is early stage, how much is later stage, and when venture investors look at their portfolio investments, what qualities are they looking for in a company or a founder?
Okay. All right, there's a lot in there to unpack, and I'm happy to unpack it. First of all, I wanted to get a sense here, how many of you are kind of already in or from the Bay Area? Are we? Okay. So it's, okay. So I wasn't sure how many sort of outsiders we'd have here. So, one of the things that makes Silicon Valley and the Bay Area so hard to replicate is the history of venture capital and entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley. It actually started, long ago and far away. It started because corporations funded entrepreneurs. And then it evolved. We imported venture capital from Boston, and created a venture capital industry. And then a bunch of successful entrepreneurs decided, we're going to become angels, and we built this angel community. And then a variety of players decided, well, there was this concept called an incubator, but incubators weren't really doing it. So let's invent this thing we'll call an accelerator. And then we had this just proliferation of subject areas that these investors and accelerators and angels were willing to invest in. And so what you saw is this evolution from being sort of IT and life science, that was kind of it in Silicon Valley for a while, to now Silicon Valley has evolved into investing in, smart cities, smart homes, smart vehicles, smart agriculture, smart finance, smart insurance, smart prop tech, smart M-tech, smart whatever, right? So what is interesting about the evolution and what has happened here in the Valley is that it's hard to think of any part of our world, business, leisure, whatever, that isn't open now to entrepreneurial intervention. You might say disruption, you might say innovation, but it's hard to think of anything that isn't open to it. And the thing that makes Silicon Valley so hard to replicate is, unlike most innovation ecosystems around the world, when people are successful here, they want to stay. They want to stay. And that's been a problem for a lot of other ecosystems. When people are successful in other ecosystems, where do they go? They come to Silicon Valley. So it's been, our great good fortune that we have this sort of virtuous cycle. But having said that, the great thing about, innovation, entrepreneurship, and venture capital has been that it has diffused around the world, and more VCs are reaching beyond Silicon Valley to invest. So when I started as an entrepreneur, long ago, far away, when I was a grad student at Stanford. Whoa, what's that? When I was a grad student at Stanford, I started my first company, and I got stuck here in Silicon Valley as an entrepreneur. Did that a few times. Two of my companies went public, and I said, let's try something different. Got together with Guy Kawasaki, and we started Garage Technology Ventures. We were the first seed fund. We were funded by Sequoia and Draper Fisher and Silicon Valley Bank and Highland. Thank you. To be the farm team. We were the farm team for Sand Hill Road was the big idea. And our other big idea was we were gonna try to do high frequency venture capital, right? So that was a novel concept at the time. We funded 132 companies in our first 2 years, and we ran it. We were arguably the first accelerator in Silicon Valley. We were also the first venture capital firm to take business plans over the internet. Before then, believe it or not, people mailed, decks in. There was paper. It was amazing. So we didn't quite perfect the accelerator model, but Paul Graham perfected it, and Y Combinator, and then that all took off. So we've created this incredibly robust ecosystem that spans pretty much every stage, from now what is called pre-seed to late stage pre-IPO, and pretty much every technology. Now, there are some other places in the world that are good at other technologies, but Silicon Valley, and you guys can fight me on this, but I don't know, some people say that we're not the center of life science, but I think we are, don't you, Reg? You'll talk about it. Rebecca's working on building up the heartland and over there, and come on, go Heartland. But, Silicon Valley is still kind of the center. So it's become extremely robust and resilient. And in spite of all the news out there about, there's a withdrawal of capital, the underlying system here is amazingly resilient. And one of the things that I think is a key feature of Silicon Valley is, in the olden days, in the olden days, the corporations were sort of unreliable venture investors. In each cycle, you'd get the corporates getting kind of excited about, let's do some venture capital, and then the cycle would turn and the corporations would all kind of go backing away. What is so interesting about this cycle is if you look at the data, what the data says, it's the financial investors who've pulled back harder than the corporate investors. And so what's happened is, the big fat institutional guys who were looking for asset allocation into venture capital realized, interest rates are going up, valuations are going down, let's put our money elsewhere. They kind of disappeared. We're getting some challenges around unicorn valuations. There's some interesting issues there. But underlying, the system is amazingly resilient. And part of that is that corporations now around the world have realized, they've got a hair on fire problem. Every corporation, pretty much every corporation on the planet realizes that their legacy business is at risk now. It used to be if you were maybe in the computer business, you had to worry, but now I don't care what business you're in, your business is at risk unless you figure out how to plug into the innovation game. And so, fast forward, I merged Garage with Pegasus Tech Ventures because Pegasus Tech Ventures has developed this very unique platform. What we do is we partner with multinational corporations, we create dedicated funds for each one of them, and we focus on finding and funding technologies that are both strategically valuable to them and offer good financial return. And so now, Pegasus, we've got 40 separate funds, 40 separate funds for all these different corporations. Thank you, that was good. And over $2 billion of assets under management in this model, because corporations around the world realize they've got to play the game, they've got to stick to it. And so our corporate partners are just saying, keep going, keep going. They don't care what's going on quarterly or annually in the venture market. They're thinking 2030, 2040, 2050. It's really very, very impressive. So when you ask the question, do you want me to stop now or should I? So one of your question was, what do VCs look for? What do VCs look for? So generically, it'd be interesting to do a VC. If you have a VC panel and the question is, what do you look for in a company? Most VCs say, we invest in teams. Yeah, we focus on teams, right? And yeah, team is important, but I'll tell you, after many years, many investments, yeah, team is important, but team is not the most important factor. Normally I like to do workshops where I ask the audience, but I won't. Okay, so the most important factor in assessing whether or not a startup is a good investment is, do they have a compelling value proposition? Do they have a compelling value proposition? You can build a team, you can develop technology, but you've got to have a compelling value proposition that's going to cause, customers to say, I got to have this. So that's primarily what we're looking at, and then we're looking for the overlap between that compelling value proposition and the strategic value to one or more of our corporate partners. So with that, I'll pause.
Thanks.
Okay.
No, there's more to tell, obviously.
Okay.
I have to add, when you talked about kind of the global dimension of people coming here, we did an event yesterday upstairs here with the president of Chile. And it wasn't a public event, you didn't miss anything. But what the Chileans were doing was they were putting him together with 3 economic ministers, I think innovation and economy and I think foreign affairs, to meet with startups.
Yeah.
And they stood up 6 startups from Chile, from elsewhere in the US and the Bay Area that had propositions, technologies that could benefit Chile. They could add value in Chile given their economy and their needs, and each one was pretty amazing. So he was sitting there with his ministers listing, they weren't pitches, but they were really cool presentations. But the whole idea for him was, this can help Chile's economy go forward. And so they were looking, like many other people, to startups for how can you contribute. So it's a big, big conversation. So maybe we'll kind of move to you for a second, Brian. So you're associated with SkyDeck, and SkyDeck is really one of the sort of original university-associated accelerators here in the Bay Area, related to UC Berkeley. So it's an interesting proposition. People think about Stanford as a private university, but University of California, Berkeley is a public university. A bit of a change in culture over the years, really embracing the entrepreneurial activity. But Berkeley is really high rated nationally now as one of the leading US universities generating startups. So maybe can you say something about the business model at SkyDeck and how it operates as something that really is tied to a California public university?
Yeah, happy to do that. And I think we actually are number one in terms of producing venture-backed startups, which is pretty exciting. We just overtook Stanford. This is the first year we overtook Stanford. I think we're up by like 20 startups right now. Yeah, I think when you think about Berkeley, right? I think about the four kind of schools that really do a lot in entrepreneurship. You have Berkeley, you have Stanford, you have Harvard, you have MIT. Those four universities are pumping out the majority of the unicorns, the interesting technical startups. Now, I do think there are many great founders from outside those four schools. It's not a requirement, but those four schools clearly have an edge in terms of entrepreneurship. The difference between Berkeley and those three other schools is, we're a public university, which means we have a lot of constraints because we have some government bureaucracy there, but you also have a lot of opportunity, right? You have people and professors who are able to launch interesting initiatives, get access to government. We're also a lot larger, right? Berkeley is about 2.5 times the size of Stanford, 2.5 times the size of Harvard, 2.5 times the size of MIT. And that creates scale, which I think is something that, it means it's harder to be streamlined because we're larger, but it does create larger network effects. We're the largest feeder school of talent to Silicon Valley. You can't really find a Series A startup without a Berkeley alumni there, which can be pretty exciting. And another big difference between Berkeley and I think some of the other great schools out there is our mission, right? I mean, Stanford is a wonderful school, and Stanford has a clear mission. Let's help Stanford alumni. Let's help Stanford students. Harvard is the same way. MIT is the same way. And in doing so, they create a lot of public good. But Berkeley has a larger mission, right? It's about creating benefits for the state, benefits for the public good. And I think we at SkyDeck have really incorporated that into our business model. So I actually was a founder in SkyDeck about 10 years ago when I graduated from Berkeley. At the time, SkyDeck was only supporting UC Berkeley entrepreneurs, which weren't typically students, but alumni, professors, and grad students. Now I'm a partner at the Berkeley SkyDeck Fund, which is our partner investment firm. We manage about 100 million in assets, and we invest in about 50 startups every year through SkyDeck. What do? We changed the mission of SkyDeck. No longer are we just a university accelerator only focused on what's coming out of the Berkeley ecosystem. We still invest heavily out of the life science professors, the geeks department, the alumni community, the MBA community. But SkyDeck's really become a gateway into Silicon Valley. At this point, over half of our startups are not founded by Berkeley alumni. They're founders from all around the world. We have Stanford alumni building companies at SkyDeck. We have Harvard alumni building companies at SkyDeck. We have Cambridge, ETH Zurich, University of Tokyo, IIT Delhi. One of our core theses is that great technology and great founders will come from all around the world. They're going to come from labs in India and founders in Armenia and corporations in Canada. But Silicon Valley remains the best place to build a startup by far. And I hear this from my founders over and over. My founders from Stuttgart in Germany, they say, Brian, I was in an incubator there. I was there for 5 months. They made one introduction. I came to SkyDeck and you made 100 introductions in a 3-month period, right? That's the level of scale that Silicon Valley offers. So our mission is, let's bring these companies from around the world. Let's bring them into an ecosystem that will help you, that has a well-defined venture ecosystem, has a lot of corporations and companies that are willing to take bets and risks on startups. And in doing so, everyone's benefiting. And I'll say an example here. Our second most active country we've invested in, where our startups have originated from, after the US, is Armenia, a country of 3 million people. And we've now invested in probably about 14 to 15 companies out of this incredibly small ecosystem. But what's been happening? What's been I think the cycle, the synergy? Now, most global governments we know of, are very afraid of their companies leaving to Silicon Valley. They're like, come here and get money, and then come back home and build your entire company here, IPO here. And frankly, I think that's very, very hard to do. But what some of these, I think, more oftentimes smaller countries that think global from the start, is they realize, no, they should do. Our company should move to Silicon Valley. They can reincorporate. They can start the company there. They'll hire a business team there. They're going to raise money there. They're going to find customers there. But they're going to build the teams back home, right? In this distributed ecosystem of employees, this remote work world. So they're going to take that capital from Silicon Valley. They're going to hire 20, 30, 40 engineers, at a quarter, a fifth, a tenth the price of what it costs to pay an engineer in Silicon Valley. And then those engineers back home are going to benefit. They're going to understand what a startup is, how to move quickly, how to build technology. And then those folks are going to end up starting companies very quickly. So with this Armenia use case, or not use case, but a country I'm talking about here, we've seen this really quickly. We'll invest in a company, they raise seed, they raise Series A, and then within 3 to 4 years, their early engineers will go out and spin startups and then apply to Skydeck. And so I think that's kind of this very synergistic, cycle we've seen with the global ecosystems. And I do think Berkeley is uniquely positioned, given our global outlook, our scale, to help new companies access Silicon Valley, and in doing so, make Berkeley great. I have a large belief that in the next 10 years, just like over the last 100 years, where we saw universities competing for undergraduates, for grad students, for MBAs, for professors, for PhDs, the top universities will all be competing for the best startups, because universities have this special relationship with startups. And I think Berkeley is quite at the forefront of thinking about how do we bring in global entrepreneurs. They will then hire student interns. They will bring professors onto their advisory boards, and they'll benefit the whole ecosystem. So a bit about us.
I'm glad you mentioned the international dimension, Brian. That was going to be my next question, because you really are a global platform now, compared to certainly the early days of Skydeck. And maybe we can bounce back to you for 1 second, Bill. I'm aware that Pegasus Tech Ventures has really strong relationships with Japanese companies, and maybe others too. Maybe you could tell us something about the global activity, or how you look out and engage companies around the world.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you. And key to our model of finding emerging technologies that are of strategic value is we have to cast the net globally. And so we've got people on every continent. We've got over 120 people who are in the Pegasus team around the world. Offices here, East Coast, Japan, Southeast Asia, South Asia, Israel, Europe. And so we have to look around the world because, Brian's point, brilliant innovation, brilliant entrepreneurs, and brilliant technology no longer just comes from Silicon Valley. So we've got to look for it wherever it is on the planet. Our corporate partners, a lot of them, because of the origin of Pegasus, we do have a lot that are from Japan, but they're all operating globally. So, our corporate partners have tens and sometimes hundreds of operations around the world. And so they are looking for technology that can support them sort of in all of their global operations. And so we have to be international in the way that we cast our net. One of the issues, though, that you touched on, Brian, is this issue of corporate governance, securities law, labor law, the regulations in different countries. And it's still an issue that, a lot of innovation ecosystems around the world haven't quite got the memo yet. That they've got to conform, this is arrogant, but they've got to conform to the sort of Silicon Valley model of funding and options and at will and, IP and sort of securities law and all these things. And so that's there's still some friction in the system, so we will, You know, we just invested in a company out of Latvia. You know, exactly Brian's point, unbelievable engineering talent. Who knew, right? Unbelievable engineering talent at 1/10 the cost. You know, they were global day one in terms of their customer base. And we said, we love it. Can you move the domicile to Delaware? And so we're helping them move it to Delaware. And unfortunately, you know, capital gains, blah, 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 you know, it gets legally messy. But you know, ultimately, they wanted to come to the US anyway. We were sort of the forcing event. But it is, again, it's an unfair advantage that we have, you know, in Silicon Valley in the US, is that sort of whole structure. So, but they are building a big team in Latvia. You know, we're not asking them to move the team. We love that. And hopefully we will be part of stimulating more and more innovation and entrepreneurship in Latvia. So hopefully that's what we're doing.
Fantastic. We'll go back to the university theme now with you, Reg. So you created QB3, which is one of actually 4 California institutes that were created back in the early 2000s by the state to sort of accelerate research and scientific development in fields that are important to the future of California. And there's 4 of these, California Institutes of Science and Innovation, 2 in the Bay Area. One sort of started off at Berkeley and the other at University of California, San Francisco. And so you pretty much created that, Red. There was a different model there, thinking, and this was pretty early days, about how can you draw out entrepreneur scientists, people who are producing technology and they're on faculty and maybe they're postdocs, but who might have a technology that could be commercialized. And maybe they could be an entrepreneur if they had the right kind of support. It's just grown and blossomed again and again since then. So could you tell us a little bit about QB3's origin, its model, a really unique model, because you've been, if I'm right still, more successful than any of the other California institutes in helping support and generate startups through your own accelerators. And I think most of the system now is modeled on what happened to QB3.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Yeah, so I run QB3. Let me just say, QB3 is a little bit unusual because it's a private-public enterprise, right? Now, it was started by the state of California. And what did the legislature started it? And it said, look, we've got these great universities in California, right? They do wonderful research. They do wonderful training of students. Couldn't they actually maybe address some of the problems of society with their talent? Could they have a public service mission? And of course, in doing that, could they help create jobs for California? So that was the charge, and QB3 was of the 4, it was only one that does life sciences. So we had this problem, well, how could we actually bring benefits to California? Well, universities don't make products, right? We don't sell anything. So obviously we had to partner with the private sector, right? That's the only way you could do it. It has to be an equal partnership. Now, how can we best partner with the private sector? Well, I think you can guess from just this discussion so far, the best thing we can do is to start startups, right? One, it's the startups that started in garages around the Bay Area that was given us, you know, Apple and Google and so on. So starting startups transforms the economy, but also all the big companies, including the Google now, the way they grow is by acquiring startups. So the best thing that we could do to try and help the industry was to foster the creation of startups. So how could we do that? And so we had sort of 3 basic mechanisms for this. One of them was to say, well, you know, most of you who have had knowledge of professors know we know diddly squat about business, right? So when you're trying to get a professor or an academic starting a company, you've got to mentor them because they know nothing. They don't know how much they don't know, actually, I have to say. So one of these things, mentorship. Now, there's a whole slew of mentorship classes in almost every university and in every state college in California. Everyone is teaching the basic rudiments of entrepreneurship now, how a venture one works, you know, how you do management things. And that's good. That's all being taken care of. That's not the sort of mentorship we give. We say when you get in, we have to give domain-specific mentorship, right? The mentorship you need to be in software versus being in hardware is entirely different, right? The whole venture world is different. The rules, the regulation is different. Even when you take hardware, the rules for trying to do a chemical company making batteries versus someone doing a drug or diagnostic development, these are very different, right? So you need to know the rules of trying to succeed in the life sciences industry. Even within that, the ways you do, if you're doing medical devices, it's incredibly different from doing therapeutics. So you have to get domain-specific mentorship. So we try to provide that to people who are wanting to start companies. The second thing we started doing about 20 years, and we were told we shouldn't do it, incubators didn't work, they've been tried, but nonetheless, not knowing that, we went ahead and tried about 20 years ago. And we tried to think, how can we think about these things are different, right? So what we're wanting to do is capture people with very little money, they've got to keep their burn rate down, but they've got to succeed. So we're trying to help them at that very vulnerable stage when you're going from 0 to 10 miles an hour. Now, universities have two big advantages, right? We have incredibly sophisticated equipment on our campuses paid for by the federal government, right? A startup company could never afford to get that type of equipment. So being associated with a university, we allow them to have access to the university equipment. A second major advantage, on a campus, you've got students who are very much wanting experience in being in industry. So we get interns from the companies coming in. So most recently, the most recent incubator we started 2 years ago, we converted a museum in Berkeley campus over to an incubator. A little bit of a Philistine, the people, my art friends hate me for doing it. But anyway, we do this art museum. It's now 2 years into its running. It's got 35 companies. It's doing very well. Now, that was actually funded by philanthropy. Now, just think for a university to say, here's philanthropist money, we're not putting it into student housing or labs or endowed chairs, we're putting it into an incubator on campus, right? Because we think entrepreneurship is a very important academic experience. That is an evolution of the universities. And what we're trying to push over in Berkeley, given the fact that Berkeley is not synonymous with capitalism, I think you would know, no one thinks of it, it's very socially aware, we push the idea of altruistic entrepreneurship. Make money if you want, but if you want to solve society problems, one of the things you can do is start a company, right? So we try to push the idea of altruistic entrepreneurship, right? So we've got mentorship, we've got an incubator. Then how do we keep ourselves going? You've got to have money to keep this going. And I'm a Scotsman, I'm very sensitive to money. So how are you going to keep, the state gives you some money to get started, but you're not going to keep paying the bills for you. So what we did is say, we've got all this entrepreneurship talent, we know how to start companies. Why don't we start our own venture funds, right? So we started, and I'm now on my 5th venture fund, which is university associated. I can tell anyone's interested in how doing it, but one of the ways we just take half the carried interest, right? So it gives about 10% of the income comes back to the university. So QB3 actually has several $1 million in its war chest right now from our intelligent investment in the companies we support. So we've tried to do these ways of trying to do it differently. And it's now, these are pretty well come standard throughout the University of California system. So let me just say, well, where are we going now? That's what we've done in the last years. The next thing we're doing, and this is not working very hard on this, the big other challenge to society besides health is climate. So we're actually we're planning now and working on, we should be able to announce it pretty soon, a major new climate tech incubator also on the Berkeley campus. So just again, keeping Berkeley being a leader in this idea of altruistic entrepreneurship, addressing science problems, that's what we're doing. The last thing that we're doing, and we just had a meeting on this yesterday, so it fits very much to what you're saying, you can only get companies when you can make money out of it. Well, that doesn't work so well in the health business. It's a long time. It's not the easy way to make money investing in health. So what we look at is an idea, instead of just waiting to see what companies come over the transom that we can help, can we go out and have directed innovation? Can we just decide, well, here's an area where we can try and stimulate innovation, an area that's relatively neglected. So at our meeting yesterday with our affiliates, we agreed that we're going to do our first experiment on directed innovation on the area of brain disorders, psychiatric diseases and neurodegenerative diseases. They're not working. looking at the tenants coming into our company, 35 companies, how many of them are working on brain disorders? 0, right? So the system is not working in trying to use this, you say we can do innovation is coming into everywhere. Well, it's not coming into brain disorders.
I've got a company.
All right, good.
I got a company specifically. If you're looking for, I got a company.
All right,
I'll tell you.
Well,
all right,
here we are.
We'll talk.
Right, yeah, actually there are about 5 in the Bay Area. I can tell you what they all are.
Okay, all right, okay.
But but when we talk to our venture capital, it turns out we did numbers on this, and it's something of the order of 20% of much funding going into brain disorders as is going into cancer research, right? Cancer, more people, more human quality day lives are lost through brain disorders than through cancer, but we're putting 5 times more money into cancer, right? Why is that? So one of the things we're trying to do is, well, what isn't working in the system very well, and how can we actually use the community here of our investor friends, also the Bay Area community of scientists, how can we take and address an issue which hasn't been very well addressed in the future? So if any of you guys, this is a new problem for us, if any of you ideas on how we can improve innovation in the area of brain disorders, I'd love to hear them. But that's what our next big challenge is.
That's awesome. Thank you, Reg.
So Reg, I got one word for you.
What?
Epicatechin.
What?
Epicatechin. We'll talk. We'll
right,
talk.
Good.
Sorry.
Actually, one of the things that comes up with this, for example, my wife died of Alzheimer's, so I'm very aware of this type of problem. I watch her going through clinical trials, and and there's no diagnostic for knowing whether a disease is working, right?
No.
And why is there no diagnostic? Because venture capitalists won't invest in diagnostics because they don't get enough money back, right? They've got to give money to their LPs. You get 10, 100 times more developing a therapeutic as a diagnostic. We need diagnostics. This is the sort of problem that we as a community have to try.
And I got another company for you on diagnostic. Okay?
All right.
Okay.
I have one too, but I can't get funding for it.
That's an issue. So, but one of the cool things is, and I totally get your point, which is that the traditional venture capital model it's tough to do these kind of things. The corporate venture model is more patient.
Yes.
And so what I'm sure you're seeing is a lot more corporate strategic money than it's easy, right? Yeah. That's one of the challenges, I'm guessing, but we'll talk. Okay.
Can I just add something? Because this, I think, is an interesting evolution, which I think those in the Bay Area would know. If you can't get enough money to solve the problems, what is happening is the appearance of what I would only call delayed profit companies, like Calico, which was started from Alphabet, Google, right? That doesn't have to make a profit for 10 years. It's got $1 billion or so. A new one, Altos, with Yuri Milner money, got $3 billion to try and do this. They're a company. They're not set up as a not-for-profit, right? They're set up as a company, but the owners don't have to make money. So it's a new sort of, it's not really a company, it's not for profit. So I call them a delayed profit. So one of the ways that in the Bay Area that people are trying to solve this problem where the venture world is not working is with this philanthropic venture.
Right, and a similar problem with climate tech, clean tech, right, is delayed,
Absolutely.
It's capital delayed, similar issue, and I think I love the philanthropic venture, but again, corporations, they have these long-term frameworks. And VCs, it's a little tougher with the 10-year model, right? I mean, that's a challenge for the VC architecture. So
it's great that we have these discussions in Silicon Valley because we're always thinking ahead,
as we should,
really in large terms. So I'm glad you raised that, Reg. Great point, and we'll swing over to you, Lee. So Silicon Valley Bank. So people in the room might say, "What? Silicon Valley Bank? Are they still there?" You remember last March it got a little messy. Well, we've been writing about this. No, the bank is very much there. It's extending loans, and it's really come back into its traditional role as a major partner with venture firms and others supporting the startup community in the region, but also around the world. And the bank really pioneered the venture debt model, where debt gets added in and integrated with funding coming from venture capital. So maybe if you could tell us a little bit, Lee, about what's going on in the bank these days, People would be interested to know that. And then how does venture debt work, and how do you partner with venture capitalists and others?
Sounds great. I was sitting here thinking about two things. Number one is whether there's a time management god in the world, because these guys are taking all the time here, and I'm sitting here waiting for it, right? Give them a round of applause, all right? Number two, we all know what Silicon Valley Bank is now, right? But did you guys know SVB before March? Honestly, raise your hand. Right, you won't hurt my feelings anymore. Okay, good. Hello. Thank you very much. So SVB has been a very well-managed bank on the business side for 40 years. Very profitable. The loans we made had very low non-performance ratio whatsoever, right? It's the financing side got into trouble. You all read that in the press. I won't repeat that. So we are now live and well. So give SVB a round of applause. Thank you. Imagine your favorite restaurant. You like the food, service is awesome, ambiance is fantastic. It's your second home. The owner got into financial problems. There's a new owner of the restaurant, but it's still the same menu, same waiter, same chef, everything the same. So we're still in business. And so that's kind of the commercial side of it, right? On the venture debt part, this is what I've been with SVB for 20-some years. I manage our Asia business. So for decades, the founders in the Silicon Valley face a problem because they've been raising money from the VCs. But VC monies are extremely valuable, right? One caveat is that it's very expensive. In good times, they carry about 35% price to your business, cost of your business. In bad time, as of now, it's a good 55-60% cost to you if you raise money now. So 20 years ago, SVB started to realize that we got to solve the problem. And one thing we observed is that when a company, when the top 100 VCs, when they gave a company Series A, there's a very high chance they'll give the company Series B. So what we did is that, so for all the companies that raise Series A, we look at them, and then we look at the one we want to give money to. We give them a third of the round they just raised in Series A as venture debt. The cost of the venture debt in all times, good or bad, is about 1/5 of the cost you raise from your investors. So it's very compelling value proposition. So a third of your round you raised, the price is about 1/5 of the price you will pay to the VCs. It's a 3 to 4 year term loan. So the repayment, the source of repayment is your next round. So that's kind of the nature of the venture debt. It's so successful. It helps so many companies extending their runway. So one example is that right before the COVID, one of our clients was valued at $500 million, but they are just about to run, with our venture debt, they can last it for another 8 months before they raise the next round. Guess what? In that 8-month period, COVID hit, and this company's valuation rose all the way to $2 billion. From $500 million to $2 billion because of our venture debt, and also, thank God, because of COVID. And so that's kind of the SVB part of it. I'm going to pause here and then.
You can keep going if you want.
Thank you, time management God.
Okay,
so.
you know, equal time. That's okay.
Yeah.
Take it, you know. Okay.
So I have another question for you then.
Oh, thank you.
So you're at the Global Gateway. So Silicon Valley Bank, going back a long time, really sort of pioneered taking people from the venture sector out of the US, like to India and China and other countries. And so there's a large global profile. So maybe can you tell us something about the global profile of Silicon Valley Bank, what you do with other countries and the role the Global Gateway plays?
Absolutely. It's primarily, we're following two things when we go global. Number one is the entrepreneurs. entrepreneurs want to go global, and so global entrepreneurs want to come to the US to do business. One example is just Israel. Israel is certainly a tiny country over there, right? What we notice is that as soon as a company raises some money in Israel, they're going to expand to the US. So that's why we have all the global coverage. That's number one, follow the founders. Number two, follow the investors. We look at which country or which region has the highest investment activities. So when you combine those two criteria, there are several regions that just stand out. Number one is the greater China area, right? The size of the GDP and also the growth rate is massive. Regardless of what's happening inside China, the entrepreneurs or the investors in China, they just move to other countries if needed. So they go to Vietnam, they go to Singapore, they go to all those different regions to set up shop. So greater China area is number one. The other region is Europe, just very vibrant innovation activity. Israel, India, and also Latin America. And when we travel around the world, we notice that you cannot look at the GDP of the country and then equate that as the innovation activity. I give you one example, Japan and Brazil, right? So Japan's GDP is about 3 times the size of Brazil's, but the number of unicorns in Brazil is 3 times of that of Japan's. Just that's what we notice around the world. Just follow the founders, follow the investors when we go global.
And are you working directly with and assisting and advising, somehow supporting the founders, or who are your clients most directly?
Primarily is the VC and PE firms investing in the innovation sectors. Mm-hmm. They bring the most revenue and also deposit to us, even though the number of clients, number of VCs or PE and VCs is not that significant, but they bring most of the revenue to us. And then the technology companies, the portfolio companies, they fund it.
Fantastic. Yeah. So we could ask more questions, but why don't we just open it up to your questions and comments? Oh, right there.
Yeah, Bert Mark with Infineon. I love your statement about the challenges that pharma, biotech, and cleantech have in common. Recently, one of the VC firms said, we're seeing a start of 15-year funds. Now, I'd like to have you comment on the trajectory of 15-year funds, contrasting that with corporate and evergreen funds. And maybe you could comment on how does this longer-term fund scenario work in Asia and Europe, as we entrepreneurs will follow the money, right? We go to Europe.
You want to answer? I'm not sure whether.
Well, I mean, to Reg's point, I think there are a number of investors who have seen that the traditional limits on venture capital sort of lock venture capital out of some, startups and innovations that require a lot of patience. And so God bless, the guys that are doing that. It's a challenge. It'll be interesting to see if the big institutions follow. CalPERS they've got a long-term, they have a long-term time frame. I don't know. I don't know if they're gonna dip their toe in that water yet or not. CalPERS, when we started Garage, CalPERS funded us at the seed stage, and then in the global financial crisis, CalPERS got out of seed, and they only went to late stage. So I don't know where they are these days in terms of the big institutions. Harvard, Stanford, all these guys, they have long-term time frames. You would think they would allocate some of their money to longer term vehicles for all the good reasons, both the strategic goals, the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, ESG, climate, life science. You would think these institutions would be willing to allocate to longer term. I don't know. I don't know what the data is yet in terms of whether it's a trickle or it's starting to be a stream, but I think we might go that way. The counter to that is, interest rates. When you have a zero interest rate environment, it's easier to be long-term. When you have a high interest rate environment, just from an institutional point of view, it's harder to go long-term. The opportunity cost when the interest rates are higher is greater. So, CalPERS, the institutions, they got to weigh that.
I'll say I've been hearing from large pension funds that they're going longer term, taking more bets on deeper technology, frontier technology, and understanding that the return cycle is not going to be 7, 8, 10 years anymore. It's probably going to be longer. And then, I mean, you can just look at the math on it. I think I was a founder 10 years ago, and a seed round was $500,000, right? Now that's an angel round. They're calling $2 million round pre-seed rounds, and so. VCs are also now, where they used to pitch 10 years ago, $1 billion exits. Now they're pitching $10 billion exits, $20 billion exits. Yeah. So, if a company is growing at, let's say, a good rate would be 3x year over year, would be pretty fast. If you want to go from a $1 billion exit to a $10 billion exit, it's another year, right? If you want to go even further, that's going to take more time. But yeah, we're very early. We invest in people, typically 2 to 5 people on the team. So you have our accelerator check, and then you have 9 months till pre-seed, and then maybe you have 12 to 18 months to seed. Then there was a seed plus round that emerged for a while. So it would take sometimes 5 years just to hit Series A. And then a Series A round, was a 7-year horizon, now maybe an 8-year horizon towards seeing liquidity. So I think many of the earliest stage funds are going to be 12, 13 years, I guess. I tell my LPs it could take some time, so we'll see where it goes.
That's really interesting. Yes, Rebecca.
Yeah, I want to bring up the elephant in the room.
Okay. I'm not that big.
Okay.
Sorry.
I've been covering global venture capital for quite some time, and this week has been really, seems to be a lot more positivity around China and US. And I'm just wondering what you think about the impact on venture capital and cross-border investments, China, US, Silicon Valley, and China today, because as we know, it had reached a low point. And I'm just wondering if you think this week will change anything.
Yeah, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. I mean, I've been to China a lot, and I used to go to China a lot, and the energy, the vibrancy of the entrepreneurship community there was extraordinary. Unfortunately, for all the reasons everybody knows, I'm not going to China anymore. I mean, but Lee, this is your domain. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to China next year, so.
Are you coming back? Sorry, that was
good. Oh, good question. Good question. Yeah. So, end of March, early April, I'm going to Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Beijing to explore, visit our clients, and certainly develop business over there. And China, for the foreseeable future, will be one of our biggest overseas market for sure, just because the size of the economy, the activity of the innovation sector over there, and also the spill out of the Chinese investors, founders to the regions around Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, etc. So we're committed to that region for sure.
Yeah,
there's a question.
Well, actually, a follow-up to that. So recently, Sequoia Capital split off their U.S. operations from their China and Asia. So if you're talking about your clients and portfolio in China, are you affected by, I guess, the scrutiny, certainly at the federal level now, to venture investment going into at least certain technologies in China?
We are. We definitely see that. There are 2 reasons. Number one is, even before this, the VC split up thing, the listing of Chinese companies here in the US had some problems or restrictions several years ago. That significantly slowed down the US dollar investment into the China region, because when you don't have an exit, you don't want to get in, right? So that's number one. Number two is the US government restriction on certain sectors, et cetera. When a VC wants to invest in a, say, semiconductor company within China, all financial institutions need to go through a lot of rigorous analysis, compliance check to see whether this is sensitive or not, and that certainly played a role.
Right back there.
Hi, Randall Whitney. I want to point out that there's a great representation of some Cal Bears up there, so for the big game coming up Saturday, go Bears, huh?
Wait a second.
I saw Mr. Song. I saw you, I think, at Berkeley maybe a month ago or so speaking, and you did a great job. And I think congrats to SBB doing a great job of rebound. I point out for the Silicon Valley question, there used to be a path, a chosen path when you IPO. It used to be locally, you'd go to one of the 4 banks, whether H&Q or Robertson. Yeah. Could you point out what's happening now in the global spectrum, how companies are reaching the IPO market and what channels they're going through? How do they get to the IPO stage, and what banks? Are there still local banks in San Francisco that are promoting, or is it a whole different spectrum? Just curious.
Is it a question for me? Or?
I think you, Bill, or Brian, either one.
Yeah. No, it's just, so, you've been around, you remember the 4 horsemen or whatever in terms of the boutique banks we had here in Silicon Valley, and they're all gone now. But the good news is all the so-called white shoe guys are here. Goldman, Morgan, JP Morgan, and then the next tier down. There are plenty of investment bankers. There are plenty of investment bankers out there. They would love it if the IPO market restarted. And then you had a very interesting evolution that happened this last cycle on the public market side, which was the sort of reemergence of SPACs, and these this concept of being able to go public through these SPAC vehicles. I don't know. We really want to get into that, but there was an extraordinary explosion. The SPAC idea was invented decades ago, but it just became a big vehicle in 17, 18, 19, 20. And I don't know, a third of the IPOs, the publics, there were a third of the companies that went public through SPACs. Turned out to be a disaster. I don't think, 19 out of 20 of them have not worked out. Something terrible like that. So, that's the great thing, though, about Silicon Valley is it's constantly reinventing new tools and technologies, and sometimes it doesn't work. But the big issue is not, are there enough investment bankers here? The big issue is, the markets and how they'll evolve. We have been fortunate because of our global footprint. We've been able to take we've done about 20 IPOs in our portfolio, and half of them have actually been overseas. So, it's easier in most overseas markets, particularly, for example, Tokyo. It's easier to go public earlier, and Japan has had a dearth of good technology growth companies, and so it's been easier to get technology growth companies going public in Tokyo, in Japan, and also in Southeast Asia. So, all of the markets are getting more sophisticated in general. So you're seeing more technology IPOs in markets around the world, and every market around the world wants more tech IPOs on their market. The Europeans want more. So there is a little bit of a pull on the investment banking market side to try to get companies public, but you got to have the demand side. The investors have got to have the appetite. So I don't know. We were hoping maybe IPOs would come back, but we tried a few this fall. Didn't work out that great. So we'll wait for next year. We'll see.
Just one word on that global perspective on the IPO part. For the same company, the valuation here in the US could be 4 or 5 times of the same company to get in Hong Kong, in Tokyo, or some European exchanges. And the trading volume is just multiple times here than the overseas market. Just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question. I think I saw Marcia there. And then we're going to wrap it up.
I'll be very brief. So the question was about China. I wanted to ask about India. India's built a fabulous reputation as a global IT outsourcing resource, and has much larger ambitions now to broaden that base of technology. What do you think is the capacity for India to achieve that? And will US investment, both institutional and VC, follow that? Thank you.
Yeah, we have invested in India. India's just, it's tough. There again, they haven't gotten the memo in terms of capital controls, securities regulations, government regulations, taxes, labor law, but there's so many great entrepreneurs in India. The sheer force of the talent and innovation in India has overcome the challenges of regulation and the environment in India. So you're seeing a lot of very successful startup companies coming out of India beyond outsourcing. I think the outsourcing ship, well, it hasn't sailed, but it's not the rocket ship that it was. And so India has got to find other aspects of innovation to sort of keep that momentum going in terms of innovation and technology. But we're still pushing the entrepreneurs, go, we just, last company, go register in Singapore. Fine, you can operate in India, you can build your market in India, but go register in Singapore. The other big one is Mauritius, but that's kind of more confusing.
So I saw a lot of hands, and we're not going to get to them all. So we started 10 minutes late, so we'll let this run another moment. I see one more person right there.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm Ryan from Red Hat Inc. So actually, we got into the Berkeley Skydeck program in 2017, and we have been the client of Silicon Valley Bank for 6 years. yeah, thank you. Yeah, and actually, I was very impressed by Bill what just said. If the company will be at risk if it cannot plug into innovation. Yeah. So nowadays AI is very hot and popular, right? Yeah. So how do you guys feel about their startup? How the startup can utilize AI to help with them in the future? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll just tag on the last point too. I mean, I think the initial thing you just said was every company's at risk. And I think I was talking to one of our LPs, and he manages a large hedge fund in New York. And he's saying it's really scary to be investing in public companies right now, because you never know when a random startup's going to show up and eat the entire market share. The last question was about India, right? India's built a core competency in outsourced IT, call centers, all things that AI is about to replace completely. So I think there's a lot of fear right now from companies, from countries about, hey, I built an entire part of my, 10% of my GDP, 20% of my GDP is built right now off technology and labor that's this close to being outsourced. So, I mean, not outsourced, sorry, replaced. So there's a lot of opportunity. We look at billion-dollar markets. So let's say, an average wage in the US right now is $55,000. You take on tax, retirement, pension, all that sort of area, we're talking about $80,000. That's about, to hit a billion-dollar market, that's about 13,000 jobs. To hit a $10 billion market, that's 130,000 jobs. So there's going to be so many new unicorns that are going to be looking at specific labor, especially white-collar labor, services-based labor, and we're going to see dozens and dozens of entire industries going through massive change right now, probably big layoffs over the next 15, 25 years. But as long as America can remain at the forefront of that, we'll create some sort of new, probably managerial class around managing AI. So I think, we're probably going to be okay in America as the forefront of AI, but I think from a global ecosystem, it could get pretty tenuous pretty soon.
Buckle up.
Yeah.
So I think we're actually, well, no, we're out of time.
All right.
It's so tempting.
I'm sorry, who's kicking us out of the room?
Well, okay. Actually, it is the end of our APEC week. There's no group behind us coming in. So there was somebody right over here.
We're game.
Oh, yeah. This is,
He's got the mic.
Okay. Well, you're okay. You've got the mic. Go for it.
Thank you. I'm from China. I'm mobile phone game developers. And my point is that thank you for giving me this opportunity. And my question is, will you compare with 2023? Will you in 2024 invest more or less in China market, or even some Chinese, founders, developers in global markets? Because right now, many Chinese companies or startups start to go abroad. So And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so the cute answer is we will spend exactly the same amount in China next year as we did this year.
Oh, God.
Okay. So, but having said that, so to Sean's point, we have 3 offices in China. We have 3 offices in China. We basically had to spin them out, the Sequoia model. So they're a tub sitting on their own bottom within China. And so we are, through our, now disassociated dear friends, we are still investing in China, renminbi. But in terms of dollars, you got to come over here. So.
Yeah. Okay, so I saw one patient hand there. Okay, 2. Okay. The last 2. This is really good though. Right there behind the column, please. No, you're with the hand up and the white. Yes. You. Yes, please.
Middle East. Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, we've got five companies in Israel. And, I mean, it's so painful. I mean, we're so worried. We're so, we are very, very anxious about what's going on. I mean, we had a lot of momentum going, beyond Israel into the Gulf as well. And so fingers crossed. I think we got to see some clarification of how things are going to go. But meanwhile, we're supporting our investments that are over there. And we just ran a Startup World Cup event in Dubai. And UAE seems like they're okay, they're fine. I mean, and so, we will continue to support our, the Startup World Cup global programs wherever they are. We don't know if we're going to do, we don't know what the situation is going to be in Israel next year for doing a Startup World Cup there. But I didn't really explain Startup World Cup, but real briefly. So Pegasus is I think we're the only venture capital firm on the planet that runs a global startup competition. We've run it in over 70 regions around the world. This year we're doing about 50 regions around the world. And I want to invite all of you to come to the grand finale. We bring all of the winners from around the world to Silicon Valley to compete for a $1 million grand prize. And so that's Friday, December 1st, startupworldcup.io. That's another one of our outreach programs to try to reach entrepreneurs wherever they are on the planet. Thank you for that advertising moment.
That's Silicon Valley. I think there's one last, there was an anxious hand over here somewhere. No, that's it.
It became very unfavorable for startups, right? And I'm wondering what you've seen as we've kind of emerged from the bottom in terms of, you can speak broadly if you'd like, but terms for startups, has it gotten more favorable, stayed about the same? I'd love to get your thoughts. Thanks.
I'll add in, I don't know if terms have gotten worse for founders than they should be. There was just a brief period when they got really, really good for founders, right? I mean, you look at today, it doesn't feel any worse. It actually feels better than 2019. There's more capital out there. There's a lot of major funds right now that are still deploying capital and moving earlier stage. I have been hearing a lot of growth stage, fear on the growth stage. So the Series B, the Series C, the Series D is getting harder. But maybe some of those companies probably should have, not succeeded to begin with. So it really just feels like we're just reverting back to whatever the equilibrium is of venture capital in the long run. And we just had a really weird period then, but we're still seeing, we've been investing now, and we invest in cohorts of companies, typically about 20 every 6 months. And we're seeing basically the same exact number of companies get term sheets on a percentage basis. And we're even seeing the valuation at least over the long run, continue to rise. I would say we're seeing probably now at the seed stage, still, 12, 15, $20 million valuations being very common. But yeah, some of those, but if you're in specific industries like fintech, as public market fintech multiples have changed, so too has private, and that's probably, healthy, I would say, for an ecosystem.
Yeah, sorry.
Please.
Based on the big data we got from our 40,000 or so client worldwide, the VC clients, and also corporation client, it's really a tale of two stages. If you're an early stage investor or founder, you're in good shape because there's a lot of money flowing around for seed money. But if you're investing later stage, or if you're seeking money on later stage B, C, or later round, it's a tough market. It's just, there's no way to sugarcoat that.
And if I could chime in, I think and part of the problem, the data problem is, for the most part, the data you get at the seed stage is safe caps, not priced rounds. And so I think there's been there has not yet been a coming to terms. So you can trickle up your safe cap, and that's not really a price. But I don't think we're near the bottom in terms of priced rounds. I think, there's a lot of indication that everybody's been putting off, tightening belts, being careful, bridging, blah, blah. And I think, Q1, we're going to see a continuation of down rounds, 2x liquidation preferences, and that sort of thing. In the old days, in other down cycles, we would see, 3x, 4x liquidation preferences. I don't know if I haven't seen a lot of that yet, but I'm starting to see 2x on the liquidation preference. And I think we'll see more of that before we see less of it in the growth stage, certainly. And it'll be interesting to see how the safes convert and how that all plays.
Yeah, and we're seeing recaps too. A lot of these companies are just recapping as well, being like that. We got to change things.
So.
Final.
Let's make it positive.
Up note.
Yeah, so my name is Bhuvanand, and Lee, this question is for you specifically to give you a little bit more time that you didn't get before.
Sorry.
I'm the time management goddess here.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
So my question is specifically around, I was actually on the sidelines of many of my entrepreneur friends who actually overnight on a Thursday night didn't realize whether they could do payroll the next day. So I'm a big believer in SVB, just saying that. But what can the VCs do better that they did not do during that time?
What can you do better, Bill?
I guess I just got to get closer to Silicon Valley Bank. You're already investors in one of my funds, so I mean, what more can I do? Our accounts are still there, so I mean, no. When you say VCs could do better in that time, help me understand what you're.
So what I had, obviously, through many of my entrepreneur friends, felt the pressure to take their money out of SVB overnight, 2 days. Yeah. So I think that kind of unraveling thing happened. I think it's still. I know of many companies where they had this pressure. Oh my God, should I take my money out, put it in other First Citizens Bank or even other Goldman Sachs or something like that. So I think that should have been, in a way, I think VCs and founders and the bank should work together to kind of make it a little better experience, because I saw some founders who were actually doing really well, really stressed out over those few days, and that was not fair.
Right. Yeah. No, I tell you, so I had the honor of being the last speaker in the Kellogg Auditorium on Tasman.
Thank you.
The night before, and I told, I was telling my partners and our entrepreneurs, but you're going to you'll have your money. They're not going to take away your money. But, and I told the press, look, there's nobody at Silicon Valley Bank who has less than 250,000 in the bank. So you can't, the Treasury has got to bail out the depositors. So that's an unresolved issue right now. Treasury has not clarified, what they're going to do in terms of protecting depositors, because clearly FDIC 250K is not sufficient. That's not going to work. but they're not willing to come out and say anything different. And the hope is you just collect enough money through FDIC that, when these things happen, you've got enough liquidity, but worst case, Treasury's got to bail out depositors especially in a situation like this. So, but I agree. I mean, it was a prisoner's dilemma. The VCs were, if you were a VC, you could say, well, I support Silicon Valley Bank, but I got to pull my money out. I mean, I didn't, okay? I didn't. But, yeah, that worked. But no, but that's a fundamental run on the bank problem. You can't count on people sticking with a bank for sort of, moral support, right? So the government's got to figure this out. I don't know.
No, just one last point to add is that the whole SVB being taken over by the government and then sold to First Citizens Bank is an eye-opener for even us bankers. Because what we found is that FDIC, every time they took in a bank and then sold it, they have all the incentive to make sure the combined bank will survive for the long term. So in our case, they did two things. Number one, we got in trouble because of the government bond portfolio we had, right? So that part is still with FDIC. So the new bank didn't have that. So all that baggage is still with the government. It's government's bond, government's holding it, so that's off our shoulder, number one. Number two, FDIC gave the combined entity a $70 billion line of credit, 5-year line of credit. So come to draw the money whenever you have some stress or difficulty. But that's more than SVB's deposit now. Meaning, if everyone take their money away from SVB, there's still capital available for us. So to the point that for every $1 uninsured deposit at SVB now, there's $2.77 capital to support that. So we are the safest bank in the whole world now.
and you're making big loans now.
We are, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Big loans. So I think we are actually going to wrap it up. So first of all, I want to... I want to thank our panel. I think this will give you a sense, you probably knew it already, of course, about the kind of energy and creativity we have here in the Bay Area and the Valley, how we draw out scientists, entrepreneurs, focus on big challenges, big issues, how public universities are engaged, innovative models of venture finance, and still the venture capital center of the world. So, and it's obviously a global enterprise. So I think it just does speak, like APEC, to kind of the centrality of the Bay Area and its economy here in the world economy and technology and innovation. And I think our panelists are really representative of that. So let's thank them. And thank you all for coming to our final APEC Week event.
And thank you, Sean. Thank you, Sean and Bay Area Council for a brilliant program.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us the last 3 days for APEC Meets Silicon Valley, presented by Sutter Health. I hope you enjoyed the week. Thank you so much for being here.